Alrighty, hello and happy Monday. Welcome to another Money Monday with Purse Strings. My name is Maggie Nielsen and I'm a partner here at Purse Strings. And we are all about providing tips, tricks, pieces of advice on how to be financially fearless. And then when you're ready to start planning for retirement, you need a will and a trust, you're going for a raise, you're still working on the budget, whatever it may be, we have top tier financial professionals willing, ready, and able to serve you. We call those our purse strings approved professionals, and Angela Sarver is one of them. So we're so excited for her to bring her unique skill set today to our conversation, learning more about HR and some ways that businesses can grow using HR. So I'm excited to dive into this conversation. But before we get into all of that, Angela, could you give us a little intro of who you are and what you do?
Thanks so much, Maggie. I'm so happy to be with everybody today. My name's Angela Sarver. My firm is EllieBlu Human Resources Consulting, and I've been working in HR and management for more than 20 years. And for the last 15, I've been a consultant to small business owners. And so I'm uniquely positioned to understand the complexities of running a small business and the important role HR can play in that. So I'm really excited to talk about some of the things that, from an HR perspective, are really crucial to
Yeah.
helping a smaller firm grow and really anticipate that growth so they're prepared for success.
Awesome. Yeah, we're excited for this conversation because growth can be scary as a small business. I mean, scary and exciting, but bringing on more people and having them as, a liability, you have to pay them every month. You have to do all these different things. So it can be scary to grow, but it's exciting to have you and your expertise to kind of coach us along the way here. Um, and so, one of my first questions, and if anyone has questions along the way, please throw them in the chat. Please jump into our conversation. But, with your expertise on kind of human capital, what do you see often in businesses that want to grow?
So, there are some really specific criteria that companies or businesses that want to grow will exhibit. And the first is having a mission and vision statement. It's
Mm,
understanding this is what we do, this is how we're going to get there, and this is what we envision for the future. So,
yeah.
our vision statement, where do we see ourselves going? The mission and vision may not seem very important, but when you think about trying to translate what you have in your head, what you envision for your business to employees, it's really hard to do that without those statements.
Yeah.
And I would encourage people, given what we are seeing today, what employees want, I would even say doing a culture statement is just as
Mm,
important as having the mission and vision. So that's usually the first thing a business positioned for growth will have. The second is a commitment to their employees. Now, you
mhm.
might not think this. When I think about some of the headlines we see, it always feels like such an adversarial relationship.
Yeah.
Employees have the upper hand. Now the employers have the upper hand. It's a reciprocal relationship and we need
Mhm.
each other.
Yeah.
So I think if we want employees to commit to us,
Mhm.
we need to commit to them. So whether it's providing variety in the work they do,
Yeah.
providing opportunities for learning and growth, flexibility, which we've
Mhm.
heard so much about, especially since COVID. These
Yeah.
are all really important, but it's this commitment to employees because those employees are delivering on your service model. So the
Mhm.
client-centric approach, which is often the third component or criteria we see with
Okay.
businesses, employees are going to help you to deliver that.
Yeah.
So, I think about financial services. I've worked in financial services for a lot of my career, and many firms will say, the service I provide is a differentiator. It's part of
Mhm.
what makes me unique. Your employees are helping you to deliver on that. So, helping them to grow, keeping them engaged will translate to more engaged clients, and that leads to profits.
Yeah.
And then probably the fourth thing is a scalable business model. And you started to touch on this, Maggie. For many business owners, it's really challenging to grow. We start out as often solopreneurs. I'm
Hmm.
here, I'm doing the business. And as it starts to grow, we're doing everything. And it can become very confusing to determine what should I outsource? When should I be hiring? What does it look like? And so I think that fourth piece with a scalable business model is how are we handling our own operations? Do we have policies or procedures in place? There are some great tools like Trainual, and
Hmm.
that will allow you to document processes so that when it comes time to bring in a new employee or to bring in your first employee, processes are documented.
Yeah.
So I think that scalable business model is a really important piece because we want to make sure our business owners are focused on what they do best. And usually it's not the operational work.
No. There were so many great points there. I mean, I know a lot of times we talk about in business, you want to work, on your business rather than in your business. And after a while, as an entrepreneur, you are wearing all these hats, and you're like, none of these are my sweet spots. Like, I need someone for the finances or for the marketing or the operations.
Mhm.
But I know when we build out processes, me and my mom kind of give them to each other, and we're like, can another person replicate this without error? Because we don't want to hire someone and then use our time to build that process when we're already paying them. We want the process made and then kind of hand it over.
Exactly. And you always test it, so
Yeah.
your point is spot on. It's if I've documented the process, could somebody walk in off the street, follow the steps, and get the same outcome?
Yeah.
So that testing piece is really important. And then we would rely on our employees to then provide the continuous improvement because
Yeah.
they're now involved in that on a day-to-day basis. They're the ones positioned to say, there's a better way to do this, or there's a
Right.
technology solution that could help us.
Those are the best employees when they come with you with those answers.
Absolutely.
And like you said, it is a reciprocal relationship between the employee and the employer. And so, what about kind of like employee motivation? What do employees want from their employers these days? Have you seen some different changes, post COVID?
Well, I think the flexibility genie is out of the bottle.
Yeah.
So, I think that people still want that flexibility. And it doesn't, I think where we're seeing so many challenges is that we're so focused on where people are working that we are losing sight of their contributions. If we're measuring contributions, if we have clearly articulated what somebody's role is, then where they work is probably not as important because they're
Right.
they're achieving the outcomes we hope they would. And
Right.
so I think that flexibility piece is going to continue to play a role, and I think it will evolve. So we've
Hmm.
heard there are some firms practicing the 4-day work week. And
Hmm.
once again, we have the pros and cons. Can it work? Probably not in every business. Will it work for clients? No. They expect to be able to have somebody serve them 5 days a week. So
Right.
I think we'll see more in the future about this whole 4-day work week, but I think that flexibility is still key. If I were going to give you, I wrote some stats because they're
Awesome.
actually shocking. And I always say to business owners, would you love to reduce absenteeism by 41%?
Yes.
Motivate your employees. Would you like to increase your profitability by 21%?
Yeah.
This is all tied to employee engagement. When we think about the cost of turnover and um, just the cost to onboard somebody new
Mhm.
for all companies, so not just our small businesses, but it comes to 550 billion with a B, $1 billion a year that companies are losing. So my
Yeah.
thought is, motivation to me starts with
Hmm.
compassion leadership, showing an interest in what employees are doing, treating them with respect. sharing your own experiences. I think tax season, I think all of our CPA firms and, all of our accounting firms, this has been an incredibly busy time.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be really different if your manager came up and said, "Oh boy, it's been really busy. How are you doing? How's your stress level? How are you taking care of yourself?" Imagine if we showed employees that level of interest. And when I think about what motivates them, again, if they're getting this kind of treatment, they're going to be more loyal. They're more
Oh,
likely to be engaged. So I think it's that respect. I also think recognition.
mhm.
Nothing could be easier than a genuine thank you or showing appreciation. And when we look at Gallup polls and all of the other research that's been done around recognition, this is a huge motivator.
Mhm.
I worked with a client. He wrote his assistant a note just saying, "Thank you. I really appreciate all that you're doing. I know it's been a challenging time." And she was out of work for a day. And when he went through her desk, he found the note. And he said, I went through your desk to find this file. I saw the note. And she said, "When I'm having a tough day, I like to pull it out and read it." And I
Yeah.
there's recognition and a genuine thank you that's going a really long way in keeping her motivated.
Right.
I also think clearer communication. I think about expectations. And we think as business owners and as managers, we've clearly communicated exactly what we need done.
Yeah.
And often it's not the same for the recipient. So
Right.
to me, a great reminder is we've been in business for many years. We've got a lot of experience behind us. There are going to be times an employee asks a question, and they may ask that question 3 times. That's adult learning theory. It's the 3.
Right.
We have to hear it, see it, do it. And so, I think there are lots of opportunities here for business owners who are also managers to engage employees, clearly communicate not just the work itself that has to be done, but what's the outcome we're trying to achieve.
Right.
Many times employees will say, "I don't really understand what my role is or how it plays into the big picture."
Mhm.
When I interview an employee and she says, I'm just the receptionist. Are you kidding me?
You
You're
run the whole operation.
exactly, you're the face and voice of the firm. So it's really important for employees to understand
Yeah.
mission, vision. What are the business goals that we're trying to achieve? And how does what I do tie into that?
Yeah.
When employees see that relationship between what they do and the firm's success, they're going to be more engaged and more motivated to do good work.
Right.
And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about wanting to do meaningful work.
Mhm.
It's important. People want to know that they've made a difference. And I'm hearing this more and more since COVID.
Right.
We've learned so much. Things have really shifted since COVID. We always wanted to do important work. Think about your business. For financial services, if I interview a candidate and I ask them, "What's your impression of financial services?" Oh, you get the gambit. Everything from, like, Wolf of Wall Street to, yeah, Bernie Madoff. They
Yep.
really do rip people off. And I think, oh my gosh, what an opportunity to change the conversation.
Right.
Really talk about what it is we do. For financial advisors, it's working with people through transitions in life that sometimes we have no chance to prepare for. That's very different than trying to abscond with somebody's money. So
Right.
that clear mission, vision, our values, whether it's ethics, honesty, have fun. Whatever
Mhm.
it is, it's important to articulate that. This all helps to motivate employees. And I think the meaningful work comes as people understand what their role is.
Yeah.
and how it impacts the firm as a whole.
Yeah. I love how all these different things, like, none of them cost a ton of money. Their
Mhm.
time, their like human interaction. I mean, it's taking a moment to give thanks. It's taking a moment to like appreciate what you did. It's taking a moment to explain again. But instead of having that constant turnover, doing something like these little things that are free, but I mean, a letter,
Mhm.
easy, cheap. You have paper, you're in an office, it takes 5 minutes, you know? And so just something like that, I would rather spend 5 minutes every week, write a letter, than hire somebody all the time and do that, all that turnover. Um, because you're right, people want to know they're important, they want to know what they're doing is important and how it plays into the bigger picture. And I
Mhm.
think people are much more helpful when they know the bigger picture, and you'll get more ROI from that person because they are being helpful. They know what the goals are.
Absolutely. And it's when I think about Google,
Yeah.
we can go in and Google anything. What motivates employees? And you will have a million different thoughts and ideas. And my thought is, let's take a step back. Let's use a little bit of common sense. What was important to you when
Right.
you were working for other firms before you started your own business? What things were important to you? And if we aren't sure, we can always ask. There's a novel idea. You know, having an honest conversation with an employee. I love doing this after somebody's been with me for, 3 months.
Yeah.
Been here for 3 months. What's going well? What do you think
Mhm.
we do well? Where can we improve? What opportunities have you seen for us to maybe take advantage of technology that we're not doing yet? Just having that simple conversation can go
Right.
such a long way in helping us to understand. Even asking about benefits.
Mhm.
Many times with small firms, we don't have the opportunity to provide the robust benefits of these, mega companies that are really large. They've got
Right.
an economy of scale. But my thought is smaller firms offer a unique perspective because we do wear different hats. So employees get exposure to many different things. They're not limited to, well, you work in a call center, you only do call center work.
Oh, no, you're gonna do everything.
You get to do a lot of different things, and for the right person, there it's a great opportunity. So again, it goes back to the motivation.
Right.
Like, what we have a certain amount of energy,
Yep.
and employees are willing or not willing to put in that energy. So when I hear things like quiet quitting, I'm like, they're not quiet quitting. They're just putting in the amount of energy necessary to do the work that's required of them. They're
Yep.
not giving you extra energy. So, all right, managers, business owners, what can we do
Mhm.
to entice people to give more of that energy? And I
Right.
think it's in some of the things we've talked about.
Yeah. I mean, just to share, I mean, just that you care and show up and see that they're there and see how they're doing. They're not gonna be quiet quitting on you if you check in with them and see how they're doing. Like, you need to have these open communication streams, otherwise it is gonna just feel like silence.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes for many business owners, there's a concern from a
Mhm.
legal perspective. Am I crossing a line here?
Mm.
What happens? They say don't ask the question if you don't want to know the answer. What happens if the answer is something I really don't know how to handle? And my
Mhm.
thought is, as long as we keep it about the person, as long as we're even to acknowledge it, to say, wow, that sounds like a really difficult situation. I'm glad you shared that with me. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean we have to come up with answers. And I think showing that you care for your employees, that you're
Yeah.
vested in their health and well-being, it's not going to put you in legal jeopardy.
For being a nice human. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's all very important stuff. Just that connection really and building that bond.
Absolutely.
Um, so what are some of the biggest mistakes you see firms make when it comes to their kind of employees?
The first thing I would say is confusing autonomy with ignoring people.
Yeah.
So often, it's been my experience that managers in the spirit of, and this could be manager, business owner, in the spirit of providing autonomy, they do some kind of onboarding and then never the two shall speak unless
Yeah.
there's a question or a problem or something comes up. And I think that autonomy is important. I think, again, from a motivational standpoint, employees don't want to be micromanaged. But I think a better approach is autonomy with guidance. Provide that guidance, let them know what they're working toward. What's the outcome this task is going to achieve? As long as we're providing this, that conversation will take a natural course. And I think it's really important for employees to know it's not one and done. I don't join the firm, have some orientation, maybe do a little training, and then I'm set free. And I don't have the experience the business owner does.
Right.
And so many times they start to flounder. And rather than speak up, it's easier to look for another job because
Hmm.
81% of employees will look for another job if they don't feel a current one is meeting their needs.
Yeah.
And part of those needs is knowing that I have someone I can go to. And
Yeah.
that's often the manager, business owner. So
Interesting.
yeah, that's one piece of it. And I also think from that perspective, not providing really thorough expectations. So when I
Mm.
think about the job description, what's the job description? It's a laundry list of things,
Yeah.
tasks that somebody will handle over some unidentified period of time. Because
Hmm.
typically there are tasks that may have varying levels of experiential requirements.
Right.
So nobody's going to come in and do everything that's in their job description. Wouldn't it be so much nicer if we had an outcome? If we said, your position as the receptionist is to be the face and voice of the firm. This means this. You have to answer calls, or the expectation is that you'll answer calls within, 8 rings. Or
Right.
we respond to client inquiries within 1 day. If we talk about how we're going to actually measure what they're doing, it's so much clearer for employees,
Hmm.
but we don't take that approach. Instead, it's here's the list of things without a whole lot of context, and we want employees to figure it out. So, this is where I think that conversation and that clearer communication around expectations can
Yeah.
be so valuable to any firm.
Right. Especially if you want the culture of your business to come through at kind of every touch point, you have to kind of share what that is, what that looks like, how you act that out when someone new comes. So they get that messaging and understand, because it's very different when you call the Best Buy versus if you call the Four Seasons, on kind of that service that you would get.
Absolutely. And something you mentioned earlier about processes
Hmm.
and how you try to work them out and
Yep.
then you test them, does it really work? Is it going to do what we want? Many times our business owners are busy.
Hmm.
They are doing other things, and they don't always have the time to document a process. And so often, I think employees come into the firm, there is no documented process. There's an expectation that once they've gained knowledge and experience, they can do it. But if they are starting from nothing, that's an
Hmm.
even harder position than
Yeah.
it was for the business owner to do it. So I think allowing time for people to
Hmm.
gain that experience, to recognize I don't have 30 years of doing this behind me. So if I come in and I'm working in your firm, there's a learning curve. And
For
that's not
sure.
3 months. It's not even 6 months. Usually it's a lot longer than that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
realistic expectations on both sides.
That sounds, yeah, really important, both for the employee and employer. I mean, you have to understand you're both learning, getting to know each other. It's like a new relationship.
Absolutely. And I think that sometimes, one of the mistakes we make is confusing activity with progress.
Mm,
We can be busy. We can be busy doing all kinds of things. In fact, we might even make busy work if we're procrastinating and there's something we really don't want to do.
guilty.
Uh, Me too. But I think the challenge is that activity doesn't mean we're actually making progress.
Hmm.
So I think, regularly reviewing what are our goals? Are they still valid? Are you
Hmm.
making progress in achieving your individual goals?
Hmm.
Many times we don't set goals with employees. So, they walk away thinking, okay, so I'm just supposed to do this stuff. And usually we have some expectation, but we haven't communicated it. So
Right.
I've seen so many, especially in financial services, not share their business goals with staff.
Hmm.
And I think share it with them because their individual goals should support the overall firm goals.
Right.
Builds that foundation of understanding. I know what we're working toward. I know what our goals are. I see my goals and how they fit in.
Hmm.
This is how my contributions make a difference. They're all foundational pieces.
Yeah.
And I think we have to not be afraid to share those goals.
I love that. And yeah, because I feel like goals, if anything, they're only shared for like progress reports to hit a number on a progress report, which is one way to measure things. But if that's all you're hitting a goal towards, that's just, hitting that monetary value, not the bigger picture, not how the company grows. But I think when you get someone so engaged into your company and they can help it grow, that's when it gets really exciting.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
true. And, I think one of the other important pieces is treating mistakes as learning opportunities.
Hmm.
You want to shoot innovation, creativity, and, that whole idea of somebody taking a bull by the horns.
Hmm.
If you want to shoot all that in the foot, the fastest way you can do it is to treat a mistake like something major.
Yep.
You made a mistake. That immediately sets up this culture that failure is not good.
Right.
But we can only innovate, we can only be creative when we learn from the
Hmm.
mistakes we've made. So,
Hmm.
from a cultural perspective, as we think about what do we want our culture to say? I think one of the mistakes we make is being so focused on the mistake. What's the
Hmm.
impact going to be for a customer or a client that we don't think about how we're treating it with the employee and what
Hmm.
that result might be.
Definitely agree. Yeah, because otherwise you're not growing and changing if you're too afraid to even just push that boundary. Because if you
Mhm,
fail, that's your job or whatever it may be.
mhm.
That's a great point.
Well, and I think it's another great opportunity. So if we talk about employees really want opportunities to, solve problems, to be really involved, help them solve their own first.
Yeah.
So if you're working with a newer employee and now it's the fourth time they've asked the same question, instead of fourth time they've asked the question, why not say, that's a great question? We've talked about it before. What are the resources you have that you can refer to find that answer?
Hmm.
Managers, we often feel that we have to have the answers for everything. And sometimes being able to push that back to the employee
Right.
helps them build skills in researching, creating their own list of resources that they can refer to. So I
Hmm.
think it helps to set a better stage for future interactions with the employee
Yeah.
when we don't have the answers all the time. And we push
Right.
back to ask some of those questions.
Right. I love that. I love that. That's a great tip for sure. The last kind of question I have for you today is, what advice would you give, a small growing business when it comes to employees?
Be intentional.
Mm,
And what I mean by that is first, really understand the needs.
mhm,
Many times when you're solo and you're thinking, "Oh, I'm getting really busy. I need help. It must be an administrative position."
mhm,
We sometimes jump to a conclusion and that may not be right. So I would encourage growing business owners, if you're feeling like you're at bandwidth, document what you're doing for 2 weeks. Do it in 15-minute increments. It doesn't
Mhm.
have to be highly detailed, enough that you know what it is.
Right.
Because when you reflect on 2 weeks, you can clearly understand, okay, this is where my time is being utilized and it's not client facing or it's
Mhm.
not in support of business development. Then that allows you, when we suss all of those activities out, to better define, is it a position that's
Mhm.
administrative or is it something else? I worked
Right.
with a financial advisor, and after documenting for 2 weeks, the advisor said, I thought it was going to be administrative, but where I was spending a lot of my time was research, rebalancing portfolios, preparing for client meetings, entering data into the financial planning software. That's not an administrative position,
Mhm.
planner position.
Right.
And so only in understanding the activities you're engaging in can you actually create the right position that meets the firm's needs.
It's
So
very smart.
that job description. The job description is the key.
Mhm.
From there, that's what you'll use to create your job ad.
Mhm.
That's what you're going to share with employees so they understand what their jobs will be.
Mhm.
So I think that's really for growing business owners, that's what I would focus on. And as you start to add employees, consider the things you're not doing that you would like to do.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes that's social media.
Yeah.
I haven't been actively involved in using social media for my firm. But if I had the right person, or if I were going to hire, these might be responsibilities that would be part of that position. So it's
Right.
not only thinking about what the firm's needs are right now, it's what aren't we doing that we want to do that we should consider in a future hire.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, it's always important. We always try to hire someone, who has our whose strength is our weak spot, whether that be social media or writing or something like that. But it is important to take that step back and see where is that time going? Because if it is all spent on marketing, an assistant wouldn't help you with that. You need a marketer or whatever it may be. But I understand it's easy just to be like, oh, VA, that's what you need. But it's not, like you said, it's not always the case.
No, and I think one of the, if I were to give a final piece of advice around, if we're growing and we're bringing in employees, it's pay attention to the interview process. That's
Mm.
not something you wing. It's
No.
really something you need to prepare for. Review their resume. When I'm interviewing, I'll always look over a resume. And when I see things they are doing in a current or former position that relate to what needs to be done in the position I'm hiring for, I will always ask questions about that. So if
Hmm.
it's a receptionist, you say it was a busy office. How many calls on average did you take in a day? If the
Right.
answer is 5 and we get 50, well, it gives me an opportunity to ask additional questions about that. So
Right.
I'm not making a judgment call, but I
Right.
have that insight now to ask additional questions.
Right.
I think we do a great job of assessing, do I like this person enough to work with them for 8 hours a day?
Hmm.
But we don't always assess for skill, and that's where the behavioral interview questions, tell me about a time you did whatever.
Right.
Because I think those questions give us better insight into what they've done in the past, because it's likely to be what they're going to do in the future. And I
Hmm.
even ask a question about values.
Hmm.
Employees want alignment between their values and the firm's values.
Yeah.
So I'll always ask, when you're considering an opportunity, what values does a firm or a company have to have in place for you to consider it?
Hmm.
If they say honesty, you know, complete flexibility, I want to be able to work the hours I want when I want, you can then determine, is that going to work? Is it
Right.
aligned? I want to continue to learn and grow. Do we do that for employees?
Hmm.
So I think asking those questions can help us. This is the intentionality. I've intentionally designed the position so it meets the needs of the firm now and into the future. I'm intentionally reviewing the resume so I can ask more informed questions about what they did and how it might relate to what we need done. And then it's the interview questions. Am I really assessing their skills or
Hmm.
their motivation? What
Hmm.
do you think about your current job? What do you love most about it?
Hmm.
Get that sense for what drives them. If you were going to create the ideal position, what would it be?
Right.
I think there's just a lot more flexibility we have with the interview process,
Hmm.
and we sometimes miss that opportunity to bring in
Yeah.
a great person. And that's what you want to do so you don't have that constant turnover. It's so disruptive to the business.
It is, and I feel like there's a part where we tend to almost rush through the process because we need the help. We're so busy already. We want someone in there doing the work, but we can't rush that process because otherwise we might just have to do it again and again. So we want to make sure the first time is really thorough. You read through, you make sure that connection is there with values and responsibilities because you just kind of want to do it one and done, but you want to make sure it's the right way or well done for your business. Because yeah, it's a huge culture shift when someone comes in or someone comes out and change of job thing. So you just want to make sure it's a good fit, and you use that time wisely, I feel.
Yeah, it's so true. And like I said, I think sometimes they're missed opportunities
Hmm.
and we feel the pressure. I think especially small businesses feel the pressure to hire because, large companies are snapping people up,
Yeah.
because we keep hearing it's really challenging to bring in really good people. And
Hmm.
so I think sometimes we feel that pressure to
Hmm.
hurry up, hurry the process, move it along because, I don't want another company to take them. And my thought is, I always say to candidates when we're interviewing, I know you're probably actively interviewing.
Right.
I'll be in touch with you by, and then I make
Hmm.
sure I do that follow up. But then I always ask, and if you're interviewing and you receive an offer or you think you're going to receive an offer, will you reach out and let me know so I
Yeah.
can expedite the process?
Yeah. And that just shows you're so respectful of their time, their offer,
Mhm.
their everything else. It's not like I have 1,000 of you, I'll just pick someone else. Like, no, I'm interested in you. I got to do some work, you have to do some work,
I love how you put that. It's absolutely true because it is a reciprocal relationship.
Yeah, shows a lot about the business right up front.
Mhm. It does.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing all your expertise today. I think this has been a great conversation full of great information for both business owners and just employees out there and managers, really how to connect and how to make sure that hire is worth it. I mean, you worth that time, do the due diligence, make sure it's a good fit.
Thank you so much. I'm so delighted to have the opportunity to share some of my
Yeah.
thoughts and experiences on HR, especially with small businesses.
Well, I'm so glad you were able to come on today. And so, just for a reminder, Angela's email has been going through the bottom. It's asarver@elliebluhr.com. She's also one of our Purse Strings approved professionals, so you can reach out to her off our site, pursestrings.co. But we'll talk to everyone soon. Thank you again, Angela, and we'll be back next week.
Thanks,
Bye.
Maggie.